Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. We are finally in the fall camp season, and with that, wanted to dive a little bit into what we've heard coming out of Texas for the first few practices of their fall camp season. And I think one interesting part for Texas as a program is as much as they've lost a lot of really good players from 2024 to 2025, I think most people and most Texas fans probably have a pretty good sense of who are going to be the guys kind of filling those shoes. Like I think about the offensive line, you lose four really good starters. I think most Texas fans have a pretty good sense of who's coming up. Like guys like Gooseby, Hudson, you've seen enough from. Brandon Baker, really talented. Sounds like he probably will win that right tackle battle, but Andre Kojo is going to fight him for it. So again, as much as you've lost guys at not just the offensive line, but other positions as well, I think you look, Texas has guys from the portal, guys from who they've recruited and retained and developed through their high school classes that you feel really kind of are going to solidify their spots, let's say, in this fall camp season. So with that said, I think there are some position groups that it sounds like there is going to be a bit more of a battle and a little bit of juggling, maybe you could say, in terms of how they get all these talented players on the field. Like I think about the wide receiver room, I think about the secondary room, like two units that have so many interesting players. Secondary room, probably a little bit more experience, a little bit more, or more guys who have been producers, let's say, at the college level. But the wide receiver room is extremely young. It's extremely talented, and you've got guys who have been in the program for a little bit now who haven't gotten their shot, let's say. But I think you feel really good about when they step on the field, they're going to make it happen. So, without further ado, wanted to get into some of the storylines who are tracking the most and kind of maybe how those position battles and room shakeups, let's say, might impact this Texas team. But before we go too deep into this episode, just wanted to thank all the Texas fans. It's been a blast covering this team over the past month or so, especially when they got really hot on the trail. And I know it was a little bit of a slow start. And you heard the grumblings, oh, is Texas in a slump? Can Texas recruit? Well, obviously, the way they were able to close kind of that month of July out, Texas is always going to be at the top of the board there. So it's been really fun breaking that down, getting into some of the fall camp and 2025 storylines. And I mean, if you've been following us, the Rock Boys are high on this Texas program heading into 2025. Not that that's any super hot take. I think most people are, but you ask me today, I think they should be odds-on favorites to win the national championship. So without further ado, wanted to get into some of the storylines. And honestly, I'm most interested probably in how this defensive back room in general shakes out. Because one thing I kind of think about is you got five guys who I think are very hard to take off the field. Like you think about Jalen Gilbo, Malik Muhammad, Jelani McDonald, Michael Taft, DJ Williams. Like DJ Williams obviously hurt for a good chunk of the year last year, but you go back to his early part of 24 into 23, that's a guy you want on the field. So you got five guys who I'm not saying they can't be unseated for their jobs, but you got five guys who I imagine are going to be very hard to pull off the field. And I'd probably start with saying Jelani McDonald, I'd feel really good about him playing both either the safety spots or the nickelback spot. And then Jalen Gilbo, you probably feel good about him playing the nickelback spot, obviously, because it's what he did last year. But it sounds like from an athletic standpoint, he has what it takes to be a boundary corner. I think kind of the buzz you're hearing is that he runs somewhere in that 4.45 sort of range. And that athletically is kind of, I don't want to say it's the baseline, but that's probably what you wanted to hear about him, is that he has that vertical speed and that long speed to play against guys like Jeremiah Smith, let's say, at Ohio State, or some of those real premier wideouts that Texas is obviously going to need to deal with. So that to me is, I think if you were just to ask me, okay, if you were going to get those five guys on the field together, what would it look like? It'd probably be Williams and Taft at the safety spot, McDonald at the nickel spot, and then Malik and Jalen Gilbo at the cornerback spot. But that's where I think it gets interesting, because again, you hear some of these young guys nipping at the heels, let's say, like Grayson Littleton. Sounds like he's going to be tough to keep off the field. Wardell Mack, I mean, he's going to be battling for a spot too. And then you look at the cornerback room, Cade Phillips is a really talented young player, but Kobe Black is kind of the guy I feel like you're hearing. I mean, he's a starter. He's a starter on most SEC programs. And then you even got a guy like Warren Roberson. So I look at it. If it was me, I'd probably find a way to get those 5 guys that I mentioned as like your 5 most active playmakers, let's say. But that's where I look like if Jalen Gilbo kicks back to nickel, and then you got to find a way to rotate the 3 safeties, Jelani, Michael Taft, and obviously Derek Williams. I don't think that's a bad problem to have at all, because that means you have a cornerback, whether it's Cade Phillips, whether it's Kobe Black, whether it's Warren Roberson, that's really, really good. Because if they're beating out Jalen Gilbo, who, again, by all accounts, it sounds like and we know he's a good player. I've seen him play really good football. I think that means you got a really good corner. And then you're probably maximizing skill sets, because to me, I still feel like Jalen Gilbo's best position, period, is probably playing that nickel spot. And then how you shake those 3 safeties, I should say, out will be what it is. And again, I think they all 3 can do a lot of different things. Probably Jelani McDonald, the most versatile of that group. And then Michael Taft and Derek Williams kind of playing similar roles, maybe as more of that traditional deep safety, I should say. But that, again, this is a good problem to have to me. But I would, if I'm a Texas fan and a Texas coach, and obviously I'm not either of those, certainly not a Texas coach, and I don't claim to know necessarily that inside track, I think it'd be really hard to pull those 5 guys who you've seen take the field for Texas so far in their careers, because they've just been such good players for that program. So that's probably, to me, the most interesting kind of room to watch. Because, again, I feel like the emergence of certain guys, certain young guys like a Kobe Black, a Cade Phillips, I think that'll tell you a lot about how great this unit can be. Because I think there's like a very high floor on this Texas secondary. I mean, this could be one of the better groups in the country, not just the secondaries, but like one of the better position groups in the country, I'd probably venture to argue, because you just have so much talent in this unit, so much experience, but also so many guys who are just like X factors as young, talented players. So that, to me, is probably the most interesting position group to kind of watch out for. One thing I think you're hearing that you'd love to hear if you're a Texas fan on the defensive line is Hiro Kanu might be a guy that Texas can depend on, because I feel like it was a relatively quiet spring for him, and he's a guy who came in from Ohio State that you just haven't seen him put it together on the field. Like, you see the flashes and like pure power and talent. I almost or like talent, athleticism, power, some of those like just raw traits you look for in defensive linemen. I mean, he might have it over a guy like Travis Shaw or a guy like Cole Brevard, but like Brevard and Shaw, you've seen dependably, consistently play a fair amount of snaps at the power 4 level, be relatively productive, not super productive, but like good, efficient players who kind of get their job done, if you will. Hiro Kanu, if he can kind of emerge as a guy they can count on, and that I'm sure was always, I don't want to call it a lotto ticket. I don't know if that'd be totally fair, but that's always what it felt like to me, because at Ohio State, you didn't see good enough football for him in the limited snaps he plays. But if he can translate his raw athletic tools, which I think are very, very good, into being a productive player, what I think that essentially does is it puts less pressure on guys like Justice Terry or Myron Charles or some of those young guys who are coming in the pipeline and that you really, really like. But I think it puts less pressure on them needing to play and be dependent on early in their careers. And that's not to say that they can't do it. And frankly, if those guys are able to acclimate to the college game pretty quickly, they're probably guys who I'm not sure Cole Brevard, Travis Shaw are keeping off the field entirely in this season, because those young defensive lineman talents, let's say for Texas, they're a different kind of cut than maybe some of the transfer portal guys Texas was able to grab. So Hiro Kanu, I think at the end of the day, would be an important figure to be dependent, or at least be a dependable piece, because I do think it would put less pressure on those young guys to like need to really perform for this Texas team early in their careers. But you're starting to hear some good things about him, and that, albeit early part of camp, not a ton of like real football being played, maybe. But he's certainly a guy I'm watching because if he can be a figure in a contributor for Texas, I think that kind of changes a little bit of my opinion on this defensive line group and maybe even this Texas team. So he's one to look for. And then the final kind of storyline that at least we've been following, or at least I think has emerged maybe from the early part of the fall camp season, is the running back room. And frankly, I think you got to look at Christian Clark. Like Christian Clark wasn't necessarily a guy who was totally on my radar coming into this fall camp season. We've talked about CJ Baxter. He was kind of the guy coming back from his injury. I think he lets Texas get back to that style of football that they want to play, like that physical, bruising, kind of rushing attack that, again, they went to that last year, but that just I don't think is totally Contravian Wisner's game. I think Contravian Wisner's game's frankly closer to like a Jaden Blue, being able to catch passes out of the backfield, being able to be really good in space. A guy you want to just hand the ball off 30 times in between the tackles, that maybe isn't totally his game, but you hearing, again, CJ Baxter, his reemergence in getting him back going healthy, massive for this Texas program. But the fact that Christian Clark is kind of generating the buzz of like being that like downhill, physical, in your face running back, I think that's an important kind of storyline to track because him and Jarrett Gibson, I'm talking Christian Clark and Jarrett Gibson, I think have the physical tools to run the ball the way I think Texas wants to and the way Texas has built their offensive line. So I think if you have a good, deep stable of running backs to be able to play that style of football and play it maybe at a higher level, again, when you play teams like Georgia or Notre Dame, like those Ohio State, like those premier teams that you want to be able to, again, still run the ball as effectively as you do against a team or some of the like maybe the lower level teams, I should say, on your schedule. I think the emergence of a deeper, more physical running back room is a really fun storyline for me because, again, this offensive line was built to be able to push teams around and bully teams. I think you still do need your running back room to be deep and be physical. So, again, the way Christian Clark is kind of being described, I should say, in this early part of the 2025 fall camp, I think that would excite me a lot because it just does almost just like the mentality of how Texas wants to run the ball. They're starting to see they have more players who can do it. And hence, if you have more players and you're deeper, you can play that style a little bit better maybe than you could last year where you really only had two running backs you felt remotely comfortable giving a ton of snaps in real moments too. So, again, there's a lot more to talk about. We'll probably do a wide receiver specific, especially as guys like Wingo come back and you get a better sense of kind of who's emerging there. And we know the names like Parker Livingstone, obviously he's been a guy. DeAndre Moore, he's obviously been a guy. But it will be interesting to track how that wide receiver room ultimately shakes out and kind of who are the guys. Dalen McCutcheon, he was one I feel like I was reading about. So, yeah, I don't just want to name dump, but Texas has a lot of wideouts. We will be talking about that position group because that probably is one of those rooms that is a little less settled maybe than the offensive line or defensive line or linebacker rooms where I feel like pretty well, frankly, who are going to be the guys on the field for the most part. So without that's probably a good place to end this today. And again, we'll be talking the storylines coming out of Texas pretty frequently as the fall camp rolls along. So appreciate all the Texas fans, and we'll get out on that note. Thanks.